Good morning, everybody. This is Anthony Sanchez from Customers First Now. We're going to get started now, and I'd like to welcome you to our CX Leader webinar this month. Thank you for joining us. On our panel today, we have our CEO of Customers First Now, Carrie Nelson, and she will be introducing our special guest, Michelle Billinger from GEHA. Before we get started, I just want to make sure that everybody knows that you can, and we encourage you to submit your questions during the webinar. Just feel free to send them to us through the questions panel on your GoToWebinar control panel. We'll get them and we'll answer them at the end of the presentation. So with that, I'd really like to get us going and hand it off to Carrie Nelson.
Great. Thanks, Anthony. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. And I'm really excited about today's webinar and discussion with Michelle, who I'm going to introduce now, who is a customer that I met last year. And Michelle, why I asked her to join me today is I think what is really unique in what I've learned with Michelle, working with her, is, she is someone that's, one, very dynamic, very passionate about this topic of customer experience and voice of the customer. So she's right up there, very excited about it. And I also like her approach. She's very matter of fact. She's practical. She uses data to drive her decisions. And the last thing I would just say is her ability to bring people together from a teamwork and influencing in very complex situations, which we all know is one of the hardest things to do when you're pulling a program like this together. So we'll get to hear from Michelle here in a minute. Our agenda for today is really kind of four things we want to cover. One is I'll talk a little bit about some best practices for voice of the customer programs, just what I've used in the past and what I see a lot of our customers use. Then we're going to turn it over to Michelle for the real life case study and how she's brought it all together in a very short amount of time at GEHA. And then both Michelle and I will really close with some learnings, tips, takeaways, and then we want to get to your questions. So we definitely leave at least 20 minutes open at the end for your questions, because that's where, we can really, as a team, really talk through different things that are on your mind. So if we think about kind of overall best practices for voice of the customer programs, and in my past, I've done this 2 times with 2 large global companies, and I think the biggest thing, and these 3 points have not changed in my belief or in working with the clients that we work with, is the first one is your customer feedback really is the linkage between your operational metrics and your financial results. So if you look at the visual there, I always think about, when you're building a VOC or a customer feedback program, people start with NPS, CSAT questions, you have a series of rated questions, you have text questions, social media is part of that. And ultimately, that's the easy part, to gather that data. But it's how are you using that data to really inform that you have the right operational metrics? Are you measuring the things that matter to customers in customer service, product delivery, your sales interactions, your marketing interactions? So they really should be informing that, and your operational metrics should be the ones helping you really understand, what matters and driving your business that way. But then ultimately, your customer feedback should be, really, the predictor of what's happening with your customers. Who's spending, who's not spending, who's renewing, who's not renewing. That's how the program should really come together, is there's customer feedback and it's linking what are you doing operationally, and then helping you get ahead of any risk that you may have in your customer base. So, to the second bullet point, it's the critical to understand your operational metrics, what matters to your customers. Do they notice the changes or improvements you're making? So that's just having the right metrics as you're measuring operationally. And then to the point of the last bullet here is success is having a VOC score, whatever that is. And I think you'll hear this from Michelle too. I don't care whether people use NPS, CSAT, an index. What matters is it works. You need to find the metric that actually does correlate to the way your customers or members spend money with you, because that is really the ultimate goal of a program like this. So as we look at, going to turn over to Michelle, she's going to talk a little bit about who GEHA is, and then take you through, her approach. And she's done this a few times herself. So I think you'll get a kick out of hearing from Michelle and her views on this as well. So Michelle, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Carrie. And good morning, everyone. I just want to thank Carrie and Customer First Now for the opportunity to just share some of the experience, and I'll share real life. I'll share where we still have struggles, and I'll share where we've gained some successes along the way. But so just a little bit about GEHA. It's been 82 years now that we've provided medical and dental plans for just federal employees. So we are in a very specialized niche. We are not a commercial insurance company. We are just for federal employees. And it really started in 1937, just after the Depression. There were a group of postal clerks where they were running into needing to really pass the hat to one another because they were in times of need. They were struggling with money, and they needed to be able to get the proper health care. And so from that small group grew into the company that we are today. And so we really pride ourselves on that history and the background. We were one of the first carriers to provide plans to federal employees. And then we offer one of the largest national medical plans, and we have one of the largest dental plans, serving more than 2 million now, I can say, of the membership that we serve. So that's a little bit about GEHA. And then really around understanding your voice of the customer program. So Carrie had alluded to the fact that this is the third company that I have stood up a VOC program, and they're all have their uniquenesses, and they have some similarities. So prior to GEHA, I was in financial services, and then prior to that, I was in marketing and print distribution, all of which had different flavors of VOC program, but I always started at the same position each time. I really need to dive in and understand the business model. I needed to understand the complexities within the industry, defining what is important to our customers. And before we defined what was important to them, I needed to understand who was our customer. So, for example, at GEHA, we define our customer as 3 different individuals. We have our members, who are the insurance card holder. We have our employees, they are a customer. And then we have the providers, or those doctors who are providing care to our membership. And so really understanding what was important, what were those attributes from a healthcare insurance position was important. So when you think about when you get healthcare for us, the members are concerned about their cost, how fast or accurate you process your claims, the customer service you provide, the providers that are in or out of network, the information, how you communicate to them, and just really the breadth of coverage and benefits. And so after we define that, we put together an index that I'll talk about here in a little bit, but defining the customer was important. And then we started with which of these internal groups had buy-in, because we were birthed out of Deloitte coming into GEHA and doing some analysis. And so it was a brand new group about 18 months ago. We created a customer experience center of excellence. There are 5 or 6 of us on the team, all having unique roles and experiences, and then VOC is the piece that I focus on. And so not everyone from day one is going to be completely bought in. Just because you stand up a customer experience group, kind of like Net Promoter, you're going to have promoters, zealots, advocates of this program. They're excited about it. You're going to have some people on the fence. We'll call them passives. And then you also have some internal detractors that you have to bring along and prove out the value along the way. So for us, we are still working. Not everyone is completely bought in, but the goal is to move those detractors of the customer voice internally into passives and then promoters. So if you have some skeptics or some people that are not completely bought in, you're right where you're supposed to be. And Carrie, please interject at any point. Hopefully.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. And I love your analogy of using the NPS, promoters, passive, detractors, to describe internal audiences. And that is 100%, in every organization I've worked with, that absolutely, there are those three buckets. And I think, to your point, Michelle, it's not good or bad. It's just know it. Know, where your barriers are going to be, and you just got to keep going. But knowing that is really important. I think that's I loved how you linked it back to like the NPS categories.
Yeah, and it's really about perseverance. If I were to have given up in any of my years in the CX VOC world, I just don't think I would still be in this position. And so you always are going to run into opportunities that are going to allow you to just present things differently or influence internal stakeholders differently. And so I just think it's don't give up is the biggest thing that I would share. And then, so as we transition, the first 60 days, so when I started, it's been just a little over a year that I've been with GEHA. We I defined it as listening posts. So when you have someone brand new that comes into the company, there has been a lot of things that have historically been going on. And so you want to understand current state. You want to be mindful that people are very passionate and around what they've been doing historically, but you also, as an expert, need to understand the lay of the land. And so within the first 60 days or 90 days, I always recommend that you just do just some cross-functional meetings with stakeholders. And stakeholders aren't just leadership. I was down into the weeds with those people who are actually in the front line, because we wanted to understand what are the listening posts. So we meet with internal teams. We wanted to define who collects feedback regarding the customer. And interesting, we had every group we met with was actually collecting customer feedback. There were multiple tools being used internally, which was, for me, as I was listening, that was ripe opportunity for you to be able to sunset some of those systems, define an enterprise model moving forward, because we had things like Question Pro and Survey Monkey, and some of those things were not large costs. However, there was no way to bring those data elements together. An additional topic that we wanted to uncover when we did those enterprise rounds were, how often are you collecting that data from your customer? Again, this is all just capturing current state. We wanted to understand what triggers they used for those collections, what were their goals. And that was just an interesting thing that we uncovered as a team, is sometimes a lot of groups just collect data, maybe sometimes to just collect data. But a best practice that I always like to follow is, don't ask the questions if you're not going to do anything with it. Don't ask for asking's sake, because that can make things worse. If you give your customers an opportunity to share their voice, and then you don't follow it up with talking to them about what you heard, what you're doing, what opportunities that you've uncovered because of their feedback, it's going to become, it could become a detriment to even not just your program, but your brand in general. But so we uncovered, what triggered the events, what were their goals with capturing the data, because sometimes people will have metrics that they have been presenting to the executive team that you want to make sure that, especially if you replace their platform or their process, or you enhance their current state in more modernized best practices, you want to make sure that you can give them the comfort that you can still capture their historical goals. We also wanted to ask them, share with us some examples of what you have done with the current information that you've been collecting prior to. So that really allowed us to see were our teams actually taking that customer voice and driving change with it, taking those insights, turning them into results for the customer's sake, or were they just collecting to collect and check the box? And I don't mean that in a negative sense. I just mean you got to understand that whole landscape. And is this data collection currently required, or is it optional? Sometimes those optional ones we were able to either close out altogether over this last year, and then some of those were really valuable, we found, and even though they were optional, we morphed them into a mandatory framework. So that is always what I recommend on the first 60 to 90 days that you are in a VOC role. You got to start where you are. You have to advocate and encourage people that what they've done to that point has been great. You're there to just enhance and enrich and bring just some more value into what they've built. So one of the things that you just have to be mindful of is just bringing people along and not making them feel like sometimes you're calling their baby ugly at times. Bring them along and keep them informed. So our VOC strategy started with, like I had mentioned, the birthing of a customer experience center of excellence group. And I will tell you, this is the first company where I have not been either a lone ranger or one or two people in the CX world. So if you are on this call and you're going to hear about our team, know that it doesn't always have to be built this way. You can do a lot with a few. You just have, or you can be blessed with a team like we have. So our Center of Excellence team consists of a design and research and market intelligence focus. We have a design UX lead. We have a roadmap manager who kind of manages the strategic programs and focuses in on everything that's coming in the door for like our intake process and aligning customer experience into every project that comes into our wheelhouse. We have a business analyst, and then you have myself that focuses on voice of the customer. So we are trying to focus on sensing and analyzing data, bringing in market research and intelligence from a competitive nature, and then taking those insights and focusing in on execution. That is our goal with our development of our team over this next year. So we started with 5, and then we have a director of customer experience. And it was important for us as a new team to bring a group of folks together cross-functionally, because what we didn't want to have happen, which I've had happen in my past life, was this is either the Michelle Billinger program or this is the GEHA CX COE program. This program that you build from a voice of the customer standpoint needs to be your company's program. So we put together, prior to bringing those teams together, we defined what are our best practices? What are our CX principles? Our CX principles came from research with our membership. They came from historical data points. And so we have 4 of our CX principles that align with the culture and best practices. And it's kind of like our North Star. We want to always focus in on knowing our membership, know them, personalization, grow with them, empower them in the ways that they need, and get it right every time. And we know we're not going to be perfect and get it right every time, but those are our CX principles. Those are our North Star. That's our North Star vision of our program. And then really determine what are your core metrics that you are going to measure. From where we started, just personally, we asked 17 questions in a relationship study, and some of those are actually going to go away. We did not know at the time we started our very first relationship study, which was almost a year ago today, if Net Promoter, customer satisfaction, a custom index, which renewal score, effort score, which one of those were going to be predictive in nature and tied to member behavior during our open season event. Open season is like in October and November when people can decide if they stay with GEHA for their health care or if they choose to go with someone else. So currently we are asking Net Promoter, customer satisfaction. We created an index with those 6 health drivers that I talked about earlier in the discussion, a question around cost, customer service, claims, etc. And then we ask around their likelihood to renew. We just identified that Net Promoter is not really at this point tied to predictability of our membership churn. We will still measure Net Promoter moving forward for benchmarking externally, but we have found that customer satisfaction links closer to our member tenure and their likelihood to stay. So we have some work to do, but the moral of the story with this is just define what does your company want to measure, what are those core metrics, and then be comfortable once you identify which ones are predictive in nature to eliminate and move forward. Or just crawl before you walk. Start with Net Promoter in my past life at DST, that's where we started. In our relationship study, we only asked Net Promoter and a few other questions. It allowed our company and our industry to really get behind. It's easy to understand promoter, passive, and detractor, but as you mature and you grow, I try to identify things that matter most and that are working within your industry. And so I just wanted to say, don't be concerned about getting it right. Just start small if you're brand new and work from there. And then building an overall relationship survey, one of the important pieces that that I can just say behind that is it has to be built around your entire customer journey. If you have not defined your internal or your customer journey from an outside in, that is the first step I would recommend, because then from that, an output of that journey mapping exercise will allow you to build a very simplistic relationship study. Ideally, no more than 15 questions. We're a little beyond that, but we're going to scale back. Just keep it simple, short and sweet, and from there, ask Net Promoter. That has been our approach. Ask our Net Promoter score only in the relationship study, and then if you supplement that with transactional surveys are those that are in real time after a post-call engagement or after one of our members have spoken to our nursing staff, etc. That transactional real-time surveys will supplement that annual or biannual relationship study. So the relationship is supposed to be about their overall experience with your company, and transactionals are supposed to be about that specific engagement at that moment, that real-time experience. Some of the pitfalls that Carrie and I just were talking about and we've brainstormed together on are, first and foremost, you have to ensure that you have top-down buy-in. There are a lot of companies out there that talk about CX and they want to embrace customer experience, but customer experience now has become this buzzword. But you really have to have executive leadership that believe in the data that you're collecting, believe in the customer experience should be the forefront of your decision making, or it should be a part of decision making. And then if you don't have top-down buy-in, it is going to be harder for you to get all of those cross-functional teams internally to really focus on making change from the insights you collect. So companies do really good about capturing data. The hard part is driving the right change, becoming innovative, and separating yourself out in the market. So top-down buy-in.
Oh, if I just jump in here on this one, this is one where it is so critical when you're, either starting and building a program or you're redoing a program, which I see a lot. There's something in place, but you want to improve it, just like Michelle's talking about. But the other key thing about top-down buy-in is one, if this were easy, everyone would do it, and it's not. And we all know that have been engaged in this. So, it's challenging. There's going to be barriers. There's going to be people that are not behind it. So, again, top-down buy-in's key, just to keep it to Michelle's point of the crawl, walk, run, just to get you going. But then also, as we all experience with organizations, the senior leadership changes. And so it gets back to some of Michelle's other comments of the more you get this ingrained into, it's not just Michelle's project, or it's not just the COE's project. It's not, it is ours, and everyone, has a buy-in and an ownership. Then as senior leadership changes, you still want their buy-in, but they see as they come in that this is such a fabric of the organization. And that is our jobs as CX leaders in this space. So I just can't stress enough that the initial top-down buy-in is important. And then as leadership changes, and it will, how are you showing it's so part of what you all do every day?
Yeah, thanks, Carrie. We talk about getting it inculcated into our DNA. So much so, just to add to that, in our new hire onboarding, we actually have an hour of that day totally focused in on customer experience and sharing with new employees about our Voice of the Customer program and why it's important and what we do with that information. So just the more that you can just keep bringing people along and getting their buy-in, the better. So the second point on this is just the data collection needs to be relevant and actionable to each business owner. And this is, from my standpoint, this is so key. If you can know all of your leadership North Star, what are they held accountable to? We have found internally today that we have some discrepancies about just different things that different groups are focusing in on. And so that has been one of the opportunities that we've had as a team, is just really understanding what each leader's North Star focus is. Then you can take the data and morph it or present it to where it matters to them. And that makes it relevant to them. That allows them to see what actions, or hopefully it will influence them to want to take action, because we all know that there are opportunities to improve. Sometimes you're getting hit with lots of improvements at once, but hopefully if you can elevate that and align it to something that they're already focusing in on, the better. And so it's not a new thing. It's just something that you bring in that they're already focused on. So know people's North Star. The third bullet about data scientists, if you're not, another buzzword or another big focus in the industry or in the market is big data. So if your company has a data scientist, great. If your company is focused in on analytics, great. We have done a tremendous job internally developing strong relationships with our data scientists and our analytics team. And it's been really interesting on both sides. We bring the customer voice or the experience side to the table. They bring insights from the operational data side. And the more you can morph your member or your customer behavior with what you see in your operations to also what they're saying from an experience standpoint, I'm super excited because we just started partnering really closely on merging our experience and operational data together. And so we just, both groups internally, have felt the power in the partnership. And so if you have a data scientist as a VOC lead, that is definitely a relationship you want to grow and morph and expand, and you'll be able to support one another really well. Fourth thing is just prioritizing actions. You can't it's like chasing ping pong balls. There's going to be so much stuff that you want to fix and so many opportunities for change and so many ideas that are coming at you that the better that you can get centered in on prioritizing actions. And I feel like I'm kind of speaking to myself and giving myself some advice right now, but because we have a lot of change going on and we are struggling a little bit to prioritize, but biggest thing is what would make the most impact to your customer. How many of your customers are being impacted by the change? What of your relationship study drivers are correlating to your predictability measure, whether that be CSAT or whether that be Net Promoter, and shut off all the rest of the noise and just focus in on like 3 things. Sometimes if you focus in on 3 things and you start to make improvement there is an arsenal of a backlog for you as a VOC lead to always bring to the table and surface. But prioritize actions, build that model internally as a team of 1 or a team of 5 or 6. Just make sure you focus in and you don't run around crazy. And then the biggest thing that we are focusing in on right now is learning when to say no to certain things and or guide in other areas. Sometimes as CX groups, the hard thing that we have as CX professionals is when you go into a company, you discover all these insights and then the teams will be like, oh, okay, so you're going to fix that, right? And we're not here to always fix. I mean, sometimes that is the CX roles in your company. For us, our role is to present the insights and partner with the groups along the way, but we're not the decision makers. We aren't the business leads. And so really learning when to say no, when to partner, what is your core competency and your focus will be key. So those are some pitfalls that I have learned over the years and that I'm still trying to accomplish. It's just, it's an evolution, and some days they're really great and sometimes it's not. But so who to engage? So defining the future of your VOC program. For us, who do you engage and who do you bring into we call it a define and design. We chose to bring at least 1 or 2 representatives from each of our cross-functional teams together because everyone in an organization impacts customer experience or can impact being a part of enhancing the voice of the customer in one way or another. So best practices is don't build your program by yourself in a silo and then expect people to just come and follow you. It is definitely got to be, you have to have an open mind, allow other ideas to come in while still keeping your focus and your kind of like your program structure. You can guide people along the way so that you don't go off the guardrails of what you are hoping to build, but just don't build in a silo. I think I mentioned it earlier. Definitely don't criticize what was done in the past. You always want to express that what people have historically done has been great, and let's just look at this is an opportunity to enhance. Talk about what has worked. Express those things. Like I said, some of our things we uncovered that were optional, we learned that were really bringing some powerful insights. So even though it was an optional ask prior to, we morphed it into like our mandatory relationship study. It was really important for GEHA to understand our members' experience around pre-authorization to services. And so where historically that was built in 5 or 6 different surveys, Some of them were optional, some of them were not. We felt that that was something that was needing to be standardized in our relationship study, and so we moved that over. So identify things that are working or that have worked in the past, and keep those stakeholders along with you. Define a strategic vision and be able to share it internally to where everyone gets it. Not everyone understands customer experience. It's something that we had to teach. Carrie, I appreciate Carrie's partnership in our Define and Design session, because we had a strategic vision as a team, and then Carrie had that external expertise and credibility in the market. And so when we were able to bring those two visions together in our cross-functional team, it just really allowed everyone we were able to educate them, we were able to let them have a voice, and then we were able to really build a powerful program that mattered for everyone. Define your CX principles, and I would also say don't just define principles. One of the things I have learned in the last 6 to 8 months is add behaviors that tie to those principles. What are the behaviors you want people to have every single day that align to your CX principles so that you can see your vision, mission, and approach be fulfilled? So define principles, know where you're going, and don't allow other recommendations internally maybe to get you off of where your strategic approach is. And I'll give you a real life example. Net promoter is such a buzzword in the industry. I mean, it's such a key metric in the industry, and everybody wants to capture net promoter. Well, one of the things we've had to really focus in on internally is we have a strategic approach. We will ask net promoter in our relationship study, and then we will ask customer satisfaction in all other areas because we can link those two together. We've had to, again, say no internally that on every survey that we would deploy, we weren't going to ask net promoter, but we were able to educate and share the vision as to why, and then we can still link their data back to net promoter in the relationship study. But that was just a prime example that I wanted to give about have a strategic approach or a vision, and then make sure you keep that standard internally, because it'll be really hard to link and maneuver everything on the back end. Allow the entire team or the entire organization, whoever you bring together in your Define and Design, to feel and be a part of the building and shaping and development of your backlog to your VOC program. Carrie had mentioned earlier, we have deployed so much at GEHA in the last 12 to 18 months. I've never deployed as fast as we have today. However, there are still opportunities where we can do some automation. We have some opportunities for cleanup because we deployed it so fast. However, we allowed our organization to give us their prioritization for what did they want to have accomplished in the first 6 months, and we were able to not only deploy that within 6 months, but we were able to bring in things from our 7 to 12 month backlog into that. So it was really exciting. We have a ton of different things that we are doing, but everyone's voice was important and key to the development of that, because I also needed them to buy in when it was their part to, like, closing the loop or taking the insights and driving change. It was like, guys, we built this, we defined this, we need to now that we've asked, we collectively have to do something with it. And then lastly, just everyone's voice matters. Everyone, meaning every customer, every employee. I mean, and take every with a grain of salt. I'm not saying you have to go out today and survey every single one of your customers. There's some statistical significance that is very relevant, but you want to bring that customer voice in, internal and external, and everyone's voice matters. so then to follow up to that, this is just a little example of when we talk about define and design. We had a 2-day session internally. We call it define and design because we wanted to, again, design a program that was not only just for CX, but it was also for all of those stakeholders. So we had a very specific agenda. We knew we wanted 1 or 2 representatives from each of the divisions internally, and we had very specific outcomes that we wanted to accomplish in day 1 and day 2. So day 1, we just really discussed VOC programs in general. Well, let me back up. The first thing we did is we asked everyone in the group, what did they want to achieve out of coming to this session? We had given them some pre-information to review. We kind of talked them through what to expect in the 2 days. And so we started off with asking everyone what was a goal that they wanted to accomplish or an objective in the workshop. And then we tabled that. And then we really talked through VOC programs, best practices. We shared with them our findings from the listening post and some drafted roadmaps that we had put together as a CX team. We talked to them about success measures, what was important to our company, some overall goals and objectives that we wanted to build, short-term and long-term. And then from that, each day we would level set on if anyone had questions. It was very collaborative. Every one of these sections wasn't just Michelle and Carrie standing up in front of the room talking about their expertise and what we were going to do. It was more, guys, how do we want to build? Here's some best practices in the market. Here's what we would recommend, but what makes sense for us? And then on day 2, we defined what are the critical survey components. How do we bring our employees into this? And how are we going, and really another thing that we talked about is how are we going to close the loop? Who's going to close the loop? Who are we going to close the loop with? Is it going to be with just our starting off with detractors? Were we going to close the loop with everyone? I think it's really key that you get some answers leaving your session about your program design. What are you going to focus in on? Who is going to do what? And everybody is committed and bought in. We used a voting mechanism with just some little sticky dots. There's multiple approaches, but from that session, we were able to come back after we synthesized all those insights from the cross-functional team, and we had put together a governance structure. Governance structure being like executive leadership, you have your middle management, and then you have your CX champions. So from that governance body, we brought together our CX executive board and our advisory council. We brought them together, and we shared with that collective group. Here's the output of our define and design session. Here's what we've committed to develop and deliver over the next 6 to 12 months. And then we also have come back to them to express what we've accomplished and what we still had yet to accomplish. Our governance structure is built upon an executive board that meets quarterly. Our advisory council and champions, you could kind of morph those two together, or at least we have. We have found that our advisory council are a mix of direct decision maker and also doer. And then we have those change agents. Change agents are those internal folks that will help to be a part of the change. So if you identify that, we'll just say that your call center area happens to be an area of focus, you want to have a change agent, somebody that is influential amongst their peers, somebody who's passionate about the customer, somebody who knows a lot. You want to bring them in as a change agent to help you understand what does all this customer voice mean that's coming in? What does the wait time or callbacks, or where is the process breaking down? So we partnered with change agents, and then throughout all of this, we have our CX team provides program oversight, support, guidance, best practices, research, etc. We're still working on really truly getting this operationalized internally. I had about 8 years in financial services, and we were really this was really effective for us in our past life, so much so that our executive vice president was the one that was actually leading those executive board meetings on a quarterly basis. And just everyone was bought in. People had goals aligned to the voice of the customer insight. People were passionate. They wanted to become change agents, because it was kind of like we had these star awards in my past life. And so, we're growing that at GEHA, but it's going to take some time. 8 years compared to a year is just very different. So operationalizing a governance structure will be powerful.
Yeah, and I think, Michelle, as we have, for everyone on the phone, we have 15 minutes about left. And so definitely post your questions, and Anthony and I will be able to see those, and we'll ask Michelle, and we'll have some dialogue on that. Do you want to say how to do that?
Oh, just go into the questions panel on your GoToWebinar meeting panel and submit your question there in the open field. Yeah,
a couple things, just as you guys are thinking of questions. As I've listened to Michelle go through this again and have been with her on this journey in the team, the thing I would say is, this whole idea of understand what you and your key stakeholders want to learn from your customers. If you listen to the way Michelle talked about this, she always used we versus I, and that is no small feat, because if you think about when you're talking about things, that is such a little thing that becomes a big thing. And she does this all the time. There is not just Michelle out there doing something, or she's always about the we. As you listen to, really understanding. She's done this 3 times. She could go in there and she could have said, this is what we're going to go do. This is what works. Let's do it. She didn't. And any of us can, if we've done it a few times. It's like, the answer. But I think being curious and being open that cultures are different, people are different, and you do have to adapt and do things that work for the greater good of the organization if you want the program to sustain. So I think that's a really important point on this. What do people want to learn, and what are they going to go do with it? Which gets really to the second point is it's all about taking action. So, Michelle said this well. It's like, don't ask the question if you're not going to do anything. It's the first thing I ask anyone I'm working with is, what are you going to go do with it? They'll say, here's what I want to know, and it's these 20 questions or 70 questions, and then it's like, okay, so then what are you going to go do tomorrow with it? And if there's not a good answer, don't waste your customers' time. Just really, we all get surveys, we take surveys, and a lot of times, there's this, people, the belief is that nothing's going to happen, so then people don't take it. So the action is really important. And, in that define and design session that Michelle and I were part of, it was all about, what are we going to go do with this? And I think one of the big points I wanted to point out is she had an HR team there too. So you talk about employee engagement and linking to behaviors. That was very powerful, because they were very engaged in how to think about their training and performance management and all the things that they can do to support and drive the behaviors. And then the last point here is just that having the natural, or not even natural, just being curious, learn, adapt, and really know that this is a crawl, walk, run approach, because you are, I don't know any other discipline in an organization that is so cross-functional other than member experience, customer experience. You really have to tap into all parts of the organization. Michelle, anything else you would add before we go to questions?
No, I think that's great. I think you summed it up nicely.
Awesome. Good. Oh, good. We have a question.
So, Michelle, you said this was your third CX program experience. Can you talk about the best practices in order to get executive buy-in, maybe a little bit more specifically?
Yeah, so I will tell you that it takes time. The standpoint of you have to prove out your changes with the data, and you have to make change with your insights, I think, to really get executive buy-in. So I'll go to my past life in financial services. We really just developed that program out of me sitting at my desk building a strategy because I was just so frustrated that I couldn't serve the customer, and I had built a VOC program in my prior life that was just natural, little homegrown and organic. But we collected a baseline. I started to partner with one or two groups where we had the most pain. And in that world, it was the members were experiencing frustration with the implementation team. But what we uncovered was it wasn't the implementation necessarily. It was we had to go all the way up to the beginning of our journey and define how are we selling those services and that technology before it got to implementation team and what was delivered, because there was a disconnect on what was being sold and then implemented. So we developed a cross-functional team. We exposed and were very transparent with the customer data so that no one felt like or was blindsided. And as those groups internally started to show improvement, and then, oh, by the way, we started to grow the business, and then more customers were becoming advocates, and then it was just growing. The executive leadership naturally wanted to know what was going on, and so it started in a very small business unit. We were getting so much success by just focusing in on the customer that our executive leadership there just wanted to be a part of it. They were very data heavy, and so then they ended up ultimately leading it. And I would say that's what I'm trying to focus in on here at GEHA is really like the data speaks for itself, and the customer is the most important. And if we can bring the customer voice into every project that we're focusing in on, if the customer isn't the forefront or we don't know the impact it's going to make to the customer, my hope is that why are we doing it? So from experience, it was just around being persevering, partnering internally, being transparent, taking the insights, making change, and then people want to be a part of that winning team. They want to be a part of something powerful like that. And so that's how I previously was able to get our executives just really bought in and measuring CX. And so but it takes time.
Yeah, no, that was a really great answer. Thank you, Michelle. One more here. Honestly, we don't have too much time for many more questions, but how do you determine the best places in your customer journey to set up listening posts to build out your VOC program?
Identify your moment of truth. Moment of truth. So journey mapping that I had mentioned earlier is key. And I know if you don't have journey mapping, I know Carrie and her team are really experts in that field, or just partner with someone that can help you define the journey. And the moments of truth are where the members interact the most, and it's where the experience is made or it's broken. And so when you think about, we all have health care, we all have health insurance. And so what matters most to you? When you have a question and you call into customer service or you email customer service, you want to get guided the right way. You want to make it easy. You want to get your answer solved so you can get your health care, or you want your claim processed effectively. So for us, like our call center is a moment of truth. When our nurses reach out to maybe some of those folks who are dealing with some chronic illness, that personalized interaction, that one-on-one, that is a key moment of truth, where the brand experience of GEHA is either elevated or it's deflated. And so once you can figure that out, if you start with your relationship study, you'll be able to tell where your key moment of truth is. It's those 2 or 3 things along your member journey that are correlating to why people would either recommend you or they'll be satisfied with you. That's where you want to drop a listening post or a transactional survey so you can capture data in real time?
Yeah, and I think that it's a great question, because I think that what we see in journeys, and Michelle's right, it's you're looking for those moments of truth, the make or break of the relationship, and not just the pain points, which are the irritants, the frustration points. We all have those, and those don't always drive customers or members buying or spending behavior. So that's an important distinction. Michelle, I have one more question for you, and then we'll close. I think one of the things I've seen people struggle with, and you've mentioned this a few times, is, they're small teams, and my experience has been, similar to yours, 1 or 2 to 6 at the most, and I think that's what most of us experience. So how do you recommend leveraging third-party resources? How do you supplement that? So there's technology, there's consultants, there's analytics. I mean, how have you thought about that and used partners over your career?
Yeah, so I would tell you I have learned the most with the third-party partnerships that I have brought to the table. So if you don't have a technology that you have sourced to utilize that can capture your enterprise voice of the customer, that's key. Partnering with third parties, like my partnership with Carrie, for example, has just been so powerful, because just because you have a lot of experience, I never want to stop learning, or I never want to not have somebody to bounce ideas off of. And so the consultant side or the guidance side of your program is key if you can get budget for that. And sometimes, let's be honest, our organizations don't necessarily always believe in information coming from those in which they have hired for the role. And so sometimes just having someone to bring credibility to what you're building and to your approach has just been key. And so I have always, along my journey, had not only the technology but the consultant side of it, with really developing a program that aligned to best practices and we could grow and scale over time. It just has been powerful, and I've learned so much with the different groups. If you have the ability to budget for that, the tool is just a tool. It doesn't, I hate to say this, but it doesn't matter which technology you purchase, but what it does is you need to have the biggest side of it is having a third-party resource that you can just tap into on an ongoing basis to help you build, especially if you're a team of one. I needed that.
Yeah, yes, for sure. And just in closing is, one, thanks everyone for joining us. It's always fun to do these sessions. I look forward to them every time, especially when I'm partnering with someone like Michelle, who I've learned a lot from too. I think it's always a mutual relationship you're trying to build and grow. And to Michelle's point, we never know all the answers, and that is an absolute true statement. I think, I've been in Michelle's position where it's like I've bought from lots of consultants, lots of technology. It comes down to trusting the people you surround yourself with even in the technology, because there's a lot of good ones out there. Michelle went through a very, due diligence on it. She's bought from a lot of them. And ultimately, I think, selected it based on, yes, great technology, but also the people that surrounded her and her team. And she also had her team as part of the process. I was there. So, again, starting from day one, making it a real team effort with clear direction, I think is so critical. But Michelle, thank you so much for joining us. You're a delight as always, and I love your passion. So thank you. Thanks, Anthony, and thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank everybody. And by the way, just on the last slide, if you do want somebody to talk to you about your customer experience or journey mapping projects, we're here for you. And just email us at marketing@customersfirstnow.com. Thanks, everybody, and thank you again, Michelle.
Bye.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thanks.